Welcome to the very first episode of the Elite Level podcast. I'm your host, Alex Elaine, and this is the podcast where we explore how elite level performers think, act, and operate. And I'm absolutely delighted this morning to be joined by a very, very special guest indeed. Gautam, it's lovely to see you.
Nice, Alex. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the first ever one. I feel honored.
I was going to say, for now, your lifelong biggest accolade is the fact that you're the first ever guest. So I really appreciate you coming down.
Thanks for having me.
Just for the guests, it would be great if in 2 minutes or less, you can just tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and maybe some of your career highlights.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah. So Gautam Rishi, currently co-founder, CEO of OneShot. So we've been going like a year and a half. We're an AI solution focused on messaging and personalization for salespeople. So it's like my background prior to like starting this was 16 years in B2B enterprise sales. So that's building, scaling sales teams. So for the last 10 years, I've probably managed over 200-300 salespeople, from SDRs to enterprise AEs to first line managers. So companies like CloudBees, where I ran Europe, Akamai, where I ran the UK enterprise team. And, selling's evolved. And the biggest challenge was, everyone's prospecting. Everyone's trying to get hold of the same people. How can you make a difference? So really, OneShot is focused on how do you focus on personalization at scale. So we're a year and a half old. We're revenue generating, and we're currently going for our next round of funding, which should be closed in the next few weeks. So super excited and love to talk more about that today.
That's awesome. Sounds like really, really exciting times. And I just want to almost peel back the layers of some of that, Gautam, because you mentioned almost going from being a high performer as an individual contributor, transition into a leader, and now running your own business. So it'd be good to just understand a little bit about when you started your career. Was that kind of entrepreneurialism something that was there kind of from the very get-go? Is that something that you knew you wanted to embark on down the line?
Yeah. I think it's a strange one, right? I think anyone who gets into sales, it's not necessarily like something you've been thinking of since you were like 10 years old. Yeah. I want to go into an IT sales job. So I kind of didn't know what to do, as with a lot of salespeople. So I finished university. I was 21. I didn't have a clue what to do. And as with most people who finish a degree, you just completely broke, had no money. And I had some friends going into tech sales. And I just thought, okay, I'd worked in call centers before. I'd done weekend retail jobs before. And I just thought, yeah, it could be good. And, it paid better than most other jobs with a base and commission. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to work for a company called Empirics, who are a web load testing software. They got acquired by Oracle. And it was, I fell in love with it day one. It was kind of, if I knew what it was, if someone had told me this is the job, I would have actually probably wanted to do it at 10 years old. You get the opportunity to travel, you meet new people, you're understanding and working with the largest companies in the world, which I never knew. You kind of see it, being in the UK, you see it in the movies, these slick talking Americans, but when you're here, you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's what tech sales is. I think you associate, me personally, you associate sales as you start thinking of double glazing. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But people, it gets a bad rep in this country. Yeah. You think of sales, you think of people getting cold called whilst they're watching TV. So to go into it and start learning that there's training around complex enterprise selling, like Medic, Sandler sales training, consultative selling. So I just kind of fell in love with it from day one, and I've been like that ever since, basically.
It's a great story, and it's interesting you say that, because even to this day, when I tell people that I'm in sales, I think the knee jerk is that I'm either selling cars or, as you say, double glazing or something like that. And I think part of what I also want to drive through this podcast is just helping to up level the perception to the masses, right? Around, we do actually do some pretty complex stuff, and we do some cool large deals. So let's just kind of peel back the layers a bit about when you were an individual contributor. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people listening that are either early in their career or even mid-stage, right? And trying to go from good to elite, which is a big part of what we're trying to drive through the pod. So just help us understand kind of the mindset that you had, the systems, the approaches that you had to go from good to elite as an individual contributor.
Yeah. And I thought about that on the way in, right? Talking about getting to elite is incredibly hard. I don't think there's any other way. And you will always start at the first step. So it takes time. It just absolutely be patient with it, right? So I remember like starting at Empirics. I was a BDR at the time, and it was a fairly follow up on inbound like white paper leads, webinar leads, but also prospect, right? Prospect, cold call. I just remember feeling incredibly overwhelmed by the whole situation. Like, how do you speak to people on calls? I know nothing about this technology. So I'm speaking to like large, like Fortune 100, FTSE 100 companies about load testing software, internet monitoring software. I'm like, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. They're asking me questions about concurrent users and like what programming languages they're using. So I just remember feeling out my depth, and that's excluding like, how do you like cold call someone? What's like a good opening? So, the first few years, it's fine to be overwhelmed. Everyone is. I just remember even like thinking about making those first cold calls. The whole office goes quiet. And, you've got that anxiety, like everyone's going to hear me. What happens if it goes bad? But I think what top performers and what the elite have is they kind of jump into that. They kind of like feel comfortable with like not being comfortable, as cheesy as that sounds. It's kind of like, I know this is going to suck, but you get that kind of little endorphin hit at the end of that cold call.
Sure.
Or when you book that first meeting, you kind of get a taste for it. And you kind of come away at the end of every day and you kind of look, okay, how well did I do today? How well did I do this week? So I think where you start looking at elite performers, is you just start like you're very self-critical as an individual.
Yeah.
How have I done this week? How have I done compared to last week? What am I going to do next week that's better?
Yeah.
It's so easy to look at like where I want to be. I want to be an enterprise sales manager in 3 years from now. Kind of focus on your current role, what you're doing today. So I just like, how can I become the best BDR or the best SDR? How can I like, what do I need to do that? So that's one thing, is looking. I was incredibly self-critical of myself. I'm incredibly competitive, as a lot of salespeople are. Yeah. So I remember other BDRs starting at the same time as me. And, and you've just got that, you're starting the job at the same time as other people, nothing like in a callous way, but you want to beat them, right? You want to outperform them. You want to get more meetings. And again, looking at elite salespeople, they want to be top of the leaderboard. They don't want to just like, hey, I want to hit my number. It's, I want to overachieve. I want to be the best.
Yeah.
I'd say the third thing is probably like looking up to someone within the office, right? Looking up to someone within that sales org. And for me, I remember working, and we had like 2 really senior enterprise AEs, incredibly successful. Yeah. And it's just kind of looking and using them as my mentors. Yeah. So one thing that I did regularly, and they kind of helped with this, so I'm not saying like I pushed for it, but in hindsight, I would have definitely pushed for it, is they let me jump on all the back of their sales calls. So listening to how they spoke to people, how they qualified deals. And at the end of that call, I would just like pester them. Why did you kind of ask them that question? I just sat there mute in these calls, but you're just listening to like engaging. You're seeing what the customer's saying. I used to go along to meetings. So those things, I find people who are just naturally like wanting to improve, they're looking for mentors, they're self-critical, they're setting themselves those targets. That's typically the people who separate themselves. And you can see that in their first few months of a new career. Yeah. Well, I think, you look at the other side, poor performing reps, it's a job, it pays well, I didn't really want to go into sales. Yeah, you can see the difference. And if that's your case, great. If you're earning well and you're enjoying it to an extent, stay in it. But if it's not your passion, maybe find something else that is your passion.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack in that, and some real gems in there. I think one of the topics that's been quite topical at the moment is, first and foremost, when you speak about finding that comfort in being in uncomfortable situations, but also that bit that you mentioned about just mentorship and almost finding those people that you can look to and aspire to. And when I'm actually mentoring people, one of the things that I often talk to is, look, I'm not a miracle worker, right? I can give you a blueprint, I can give you a system, but the bit that I can't teach you specifically is how to have character, resilience, drive, passion, energy. And you've got to bring that side of things to the table in order to drive the results. So I'd kind of love to get your perspective on those two things. When you speak about mentorship and having people kind of finding comfort in those challenging situations, do you feel as a leader that you can teach or ignite that in someone, or do you feel that's just a bit they've got to bring to the table, their character?
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I would say it's a bit of both, right? If I look back at my career, if I look back at when I hire, I always look for that character. Like, you can go into, okay, what was the biggest deal you closed, or, talk me through a sales cycle. But what you're really trying to unpack is, like, what happens when this person's back's against the wall? Yeah. What happens when, they work their ass off for 3 months and they can't close a deal? Yeah. Or they go 3 weeks, they do everything perfectly, but can't book a meeting. Because that happens to everyone. It doesn't matter how good you are, you'll just go through those dry patches. So what you're looking for is, what is that character? So you can, it has to kind of be there as a desire, I would say. Yeah. But I think as a good leader, you can also, like, if that base level is there, you can bring it out further. So you can kind of give them that confidence to say, hey, look, I know what your natural personality is. I can tell you're a fighter. If your back's against the wall, you'll come out swinging, you'll go harder. So I think it's part taught, part inspired. But again, I think to your point, it has to, like, be there within that individual, that desire to, can I be the best? Can I, even if you're not doing great in your career, even if you've had a really bad quarter, you've got to look back and, like, why did I have that bad quarter? You've got to take that, like, responsibility. I think, again, looking at poor performing salespeople, they'll always look to someone to blame. Oh, the product, it's missing this feature. I bought all my SE did a bad job of this, or I got a really bad patch. They'll always find there's always something to complain about. But I think what you'll find with the top performers is, where they've had a bad quarter, they'll be honest with themselves. Was I disciplined? Did I make the calls? Did I get distracted by that deal at the end of the month? Why I stopped doing all my prospecting? But so again, it's that you have to have that inner desire. I'm not saying you have to be, like, gung-ho, waking up 5 a.m. in the morning, doing, like, a half marathon, being, like, psyched up every day. Just having that, inner calm voice that says, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. This is how I'm going to improve. Where do I want to be at the end of the year? Where do I want to be at the end of the quarter? And it's just, it's taking that responsibility.
Sure. It kind of reminds me a lot. I don't know if you know Jocko Willink at all, in his book, Extreme Ownership, but kind of takes me back to that a little bit, right? It's just the successes, the failures, everything in between, just taking complete and utter ownership of all of those things, whether you feel that you're to blame or a teammate or a colleague. It's really about controlling the controllables, right? Looking at the things that are within your sphere of control, taking ownership and going out and making it happen. So no, it's a really good story in that. Just when you think about yourself, again, being back a little bit early in your career, it sounds like working hard was naturally a massive ingredient. You've spoken about being on the phones, I guess an element of having the hustle. And to some people, I guess that word hustle and grind has become a little bit of a swear word in some people's minds, right? And then at the same time, we have the likes of Elon Musk saying he's working 80 to 100 hours a week. So I'd love to get your thoughts and perspective on, that balance of, mental health, maybe taking time out, rest and relaxation. Or do, reps that are early in their career need to accept that if you choose the path of sales, it's going to be tough, right? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Again, I would say times, like, it's difficult. Times have also changed, right? I think when I started my career, it was very much, you're glued to your desk until you make your 100 calls a day. But I also believe, even now today, like, if you're starting in your career, you have to prove yourself. Right. I think, if you're starting your career and you're potentially, like, younger in years, you've got a lot more energy than guys in their 50s or 60s. So there's an expectation that, you have to prove yourself. Right. But you're also at an age where, I've said this to every kind of sales rep I've managed, the first 2 years of your career are probably the most important. What you learn in that first 2 years, what you can absorb, how hard you work, that sets you up. If you start the first 2 years of your career with, like, I'm only going to work, 6 hours today. Oh, this company over there is doing a 4-day work week. That's what I want. I want to, you should absolutely get your downtime. I'm a big believer in, resting on the weekends, right? Go at it, go hard. Like, Monday to Friday, like, that's work, right? Friday afternoon, everyone starts slacking off, which is fine. But you go in Monday, you go hard, right? All the way through to the end of the week. But then on the weekend, make sure you get that downtime. Don't and I was a big believer in, this is when everyone had 2 work phones. So it was a work phone and a personal phone.
Yeah.
I used to just throw my work phone to the side of the room, get home on a Friday, just because I wanted that switch off. Because again, it wasn't productive. It's not like I was working 30 hours over the weekend. So I think it is important. I've from 21 up until 34, I was working non-stop. And then you do start feeling it. When you start getting into your mid-30s, 10, 15 years in, you're getting a bit tired now. And so it's important to get that downtime. But I think the thing that helps is, and I went through this, is you do feel that pressure that you should be constantly working. You should be constantly, if I'm not working, I'm thinking about a deal. If I'm not thinking about a deal, I'm thinking, okay, what did I do wrong this week? It becomes unproductive. Sure. What I notice is if you start thinking about that, if you're spending a lot of time thinking about work, it probably means you haven't got a good plan in place. Probably means you're going in and you're kind of rushing about, making random cold calls on a Monday, chasing up random deals on a Tuesday. It just means you're finishing a Friday and you've just been running about like a headless chicken. Yeah. Whereas I've kind of got older, I've had more of a structure in place, more process in place. That means that, okay, I know on a Monday, I'm going to go through my cold calls. Every 9 to 11 a.m., I'm a morning person, so I'm going to do my cold calling then. I'm going to make sure, from the afternoon, I'm chasing up on my deals. Have I qualified my deals? And as soon as you start getting better at that, you become better at switching off, is what I found.
Nice. Fantastic insights in that. And I think there's something to be said in working smart and hard, right? And I think you've spoken a lot about just kind of having the hustle and just going after it. But now as you've gotten a little bit older, just having some of those smarts and thinking about where can I get the best return on investment on my time becomes really, really important. And probably the second strand is also, you mentioned earlier, just being passionate about what you do. Yeah. I think back to early in my career, I was originally had a full scholarship studying law. I dropped out, went into sales. Parents weren't very happy, but I knew this is what I loved, right? And fast forward now, don't get me wrong, do times get stressful sometimes? Absolutely, but I love what I do. Yeah. So I think it makes it a lot easier to just continue to press forward. And it sounds like it's kind of similar for you too.
Yeah, I think stress is part of the job, unfortunately. As much as I would love to live a stress-free, as with every salesperson, ultimately there's things in our control. I think we mentioned things out of our control. You can manage a deal to perfection, right? A large enterprise deal, you've qualified it, you're speaking with the economic buyer, you've brought in your management team, you've ticked off every box, you've value sold. And then someone leaves or a competitor comes in at the last minute, changing the scope of the deal. Something changes internally within that organization. They just announce some bad stock results or something like that. Those are out of your control, but that doesn't mean it's not stressful. Losing a deal that you might have had in forecast for the quarter, knowing that it might be slipping away, or your champion's left and gone to a new organization. Mm-hmm. You lose sleep over them. You wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning. There's that pressure. I've got to tell my boss about this. But I think what you'll learn is they're inconsequential in the larger things, because as long as you can say, I've done everything, we were unlucky on this, or losing happens, that's fine. That's kind of you come to deal with those things, I think.
Sure. No, really interesting stuff. I want to fast forward a little bit now, Gautam, to you as a leader now, right? You mentioned positions at Akamai and some of the other organizations. So tell us a little bit about what it was like transitioning from an individual contributor to a leader. Mm-hmm. What were you excited about? What terrified you? Just kind of give us the lowdown.
Yeah. I remember it well. I remember it really well. So I think I started my career, I was at Empirics, and I went off to a company called 1E, who just recently sold. And I spent 4 years at 1E before I moved into leadership. And I was an enterprise rep, so managing large accounts, Barclays, Avivas, closing $500,000-$600,000 deals. And I was comfortable. I just sussed how to enterprise sell. I was kind of okay, it's taken me 8 years, I would say it takes to really understand complex enterprise selling. And I was getting into my peak enterprise selling skills. I moved on to the company. I went to a company called CD Networks, who are a content delivery provider, similar to Akamai, Cloudflare. And it was a US company who was just starting to expand into Europe, and they said, hey, you can come become a rep here, shorter sales cycles, really good commission. So I was really excited by the opportunity. I was working directly to for the COO in the US. I was like, this is a great opportunity, love this. Plus there was an opportunity to potentially move into a leadership position. And I was like 29 at the time. I thought, okay, this is perfect. I think, looking at this for the next 3 to 5 years, this is a really good opportunity for me. So I went in as a rep and I hit the ground running. I think I closed in my second month, I closed like a $300,000-$400,000 deal.
Wow.
And I was like super excited. I think the following month I closed another like 60, 70K deal. And then my boss at the time, who was the COO, says, hey, look, Amir's going through some significant growth. Do you want to like build out a team? And obviously, like, when you start in sales, it's a natural progression. I was felt, okay, I've done 8-9 years as an AE. I've done a BDR to AE. The next step is, building and leading a team. So I just kind of bit his hand off. And I was like, absolutely, I'm ready for it. I think there were a few people within that organization who's like, Gautam's not ready for this. He's a great salesperson.
Yeah.
He's that guy you go for beers with. He'll close those deals, but can he build and manage a team? That's and I would probably say they were right at the time, because there is a difference between, that really great salesperson who builds great relationships with his customers or her customers to becoming a leader. Becoming a leader is people like look up to you within that organization. You set the standard, you lead from the front. Sure. So it's very different to potentially being an AE. So I took that opportunity and we hired like crazy. So considering I've never built and managed a team before, over the next 3 years, we built the team out to 50 people. So I had like 20 direct reports, 10 SDRs, account managers, and we grew that business from $2 million to $40 million in 3 years.
Wow.
And I'm not going to take credit for that. I think the market timing was great. We were selling an unbelievably good product in a really good market. So it meant that we can scale. But it was incredibly daunting. You're incredibly insecure because you're hiring people and you're kind of like, I felt like I'm young and inexperienced and I'm like my first leadership role. Are these people going to respect me as their sales leader? Like, does this guy know what he's doing? Has he managed before? But again, you kind of quickly forget about that. And then my style was to go hands-on, be involved, looking for people. And I would probably say my hiring style is exactly the same, like 10 years on. Looking for like grit, determination, energy, people who wanted to step up in their career. And we just built a great team. And you have to lead. You have to, like, as a leader, you think, I have to be better than my team. They have to look at me. I have to know more about the products. I have to know how to navigate internal processes. I know if they come to me, I need to add value to them. I need to help them. And I still believe in that to this day. Incredibly stressful, though. That, like, managing people, putting people on performance plans, like, unfortunately having to let go of people, hiring people, making bad hiring decisions. Those obviously came in that 3-year period. And that's stressful going into it. And that, I would say, that's still to this day is the hardest part of leadership is you're always going to, like, it's not necessarily a bad hire, it's just a bad fit for the organization at that moment in time. Sure. So that's the struggle. But yeah, incredibly excited. And then I loved it. I actually would say I probably went to becoming a better leader than I was a better AE. I saw you can take, like low performing or middle performing reps and turn them into high performers, and watching them grow. And like, I always think like you need to hire people and make them better than you. Yeah. So when I can go into meetings and I can see, wow, that rep would kick my ass on a deal. Yeah. I couldn't say that about them 2 years ago, but I would be scared going up against them in a deal. That's where you're like, I've done my job as a leader.
Wow. Yeah, it's powerful stuff in there. There'll be some people, and I know I've been here myself, right, where you feel like you've done it all, right? You've ticked all of the boxes. You've done the big deals. You're showing all the right behaviors, but you're just not getting your shot. Yeah. And it can be very frustrating, right? So what would your kind of guidance be to that very person who's in that position at the moment and is kind of feeling a little bit at the end of their tether?
Yeah, yeah. And that is completely natural for, I would say, 90% of people, right? I think it's it's a two-way conversation that you have to have within your organization. What we sometimes think inside, and you can get incredibly frustrated by, your organization may not know. So I think it's always good to have that discussion up front with your manager, right? To say, hey, even before, like if I give the example of CD Networks, when I was speaking with the COO at the time, I went in and said, hey, look, I'm at a point in my career where, I've been closing large deals. I'm not saying I want to walk into a leadership position here. I need to prove myself. I need to earn that. But, if I do these things, is there a path to leadership for me? Or if there's not, what is it you need to see? So that's going into a new role, right? If you feel you're at that point where you want to step up, make sure you've had that dialogue with your manager. That's going into role. Let's say you're already in role and you're like, okay, I'm outperforming everyone. I'm the best here. How do I? And never meant you can be the best sales rep in the company and be a terrible leader. They're two different skill sets.
Sure.
But what you can do is have that conversation with your leader. No sales leader in the world will ever look down at someone who's asking for that conversation. It's a sign of ambition. You've got to do it at the right time. You can't go in, you've been at the company 1 month and say, hey, I want to build out this big team. I deserve it because I did all these great things previously. But have that conversation. Hey, look, what does a roadmap look like for me?
Yeah.
Is it a 3-month roadmap? Is it a 6-month roadmap? Are they just giving me lip service? There will be sales leaders who are like, yeah, you're doing a great job. Yeah, why don't we talk about it at the end of the year? But what are the deliverables that we need to do? Unfortunately, this isn't good to say or nice to hear, but sometimes there may not be a path for that person within the company. But it's good to have that conversation, with your manager early and ask them, hey, look, is there a path for me here?
Sure.
And you've got to make that decision. Okay, am I going to be here for another 5 years and not get my shot? If your manager is saying, hey, what is the roadmap? That's fine. Right? There's always going to be variables, right? The company could have a bad quarter. There could be layoffs. A competitor could come in. Funding might get lost. But overall, make sure you're having that discussion internally. Make sure the deliverables are set. Understand what the timelines are behind that deliverable. So it's like, okay, great. This is your 6-month plan to get you into leadership. So just make sure that's clear. It's a two-way dialogue.
This is gold. Some great insights coming out of here. And it takes me back a little bit to some insights actually Andy Byron, CRO at Lacework, taught me, which is really that great leaders are people that are able to impart knowledge and ultimately develop people. I think sometimes that's an underrated skill or characteristics that people might think a lot about, being a manager. It's the recruitment and it's the strategy and it's all of that. But it's actually, can you develop people, right? Can you take a team and take them from A to point B in a way that you don't rely on your natural talent, right? You can't teach natural talent. So you've got to be able to have a system that you can evangelize and get people centered behind, where they have the belief and actually can ingest it and go out there and drive some great results. So a lot of that sounds like it plays into what you're saying as well.
Yeah. It's so developing, that is leadership, developing your team, developing your people. If you can't do that, then probably leadership isn't right for you, right? So it's can I make people better? Can I look for that DNA in someone as well? Have I got that? So, and again, these are things you can learn. Unfortunately, you will make a ton of mistakes, right? When you're hiring, you'll think, okay, this person, they'll interview great, but actually what they'll do is they'll interview great and then they'll suck at their job. And what I mean by they suck at their job is they're just not doing the activity. Yeah. They're not willing to take feedback. They're used to doing things the way they've been used to doing it. I know, again, my previous CRO, Anthony Palladino, who actually worked with Andy Byron before.
Nice.
He would always be like, can they unlearn was always a big thing. Have they got the ability to say, okay, I'm willing to unlearn and try things a new way? And that's incredibly important. Like, I can go in and recently I've been working with a lot of other co-founders and new CEOs. And I've got a hardcore sales hat on for the last 18 years. But now I have to look at the world slightly differently. I look at product, finances, marketing, investment, funding, competitive. So I've had to wear 20 hats now. So I've almost got to have to unlearn some of my sales hat to learn other divisions as well. So it's really important that as an individual, you can sit back and be like, okay, maybe there is a better way of doing things. I'm great, I'm really good, but I need to look to see how I can unlearn maybe some bad habits I've picked up, as we all do. And learn some new great habits.
Yeah, no, really interesting. And, You know, something I want to unpack with you on this is leadership as glamorous as it sometimes seems? And the reason I ask that is it feels like everyone's got this view of the natural steps that you take as a salesperson. You know, you're an SDR, you're an AE, maybe then you're an enterprise or strategic AE or whatever the case is. And then you just move to management. That's kind of the default path I think everyone just convinced themselves on. When actually through what you're saying, is it always the right thing for everyone, right? And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on how people should navigate that conversation in their head. Is it as glamorous as it sometimes seems?
Yeah. I would definitely say it's not glamorous. But I agree. I know what it's like, right? It's that whole grass is greener.
Yeah.
It's the same principle as you grow up, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house. It's like, it's ingrained into you. Actually, for some people, it's like, actually, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. Actually, I don't want to get a huge mortgage. I actually just want to rent, and I want to travel abroad, and I want to do all these other things. It's whatever that individual. I think you've got to understand what you like and don't like as an individual. So I think for management, it's a completely, people rely on you. Like a lot of people rely on you. Your team relies on you. Like the senior leadership team rely on you. Where, sometimes, in those early years, of leadership, when I was at CD Networks, I left CD Networks. We got acquired by a company called KDDI, which is a huge Japanese telco. I was looking to make my next move, and I had to make a decision. Do I want to? I was still quite young. I was like, okay, I've only got 3 years of leadership experience, so I can go back into an AE role, or I can continue, and advance in this leadership role. And I thought about it long and hard. I wasn't married to leadership at this point. I was still 32. So I was like, okay, I'm still, in my peak. I can still go out and make tons of money being an AE. And I had to decide because it is stressful. People are coming up to you all the time. Like when deals are going wrong, you have to take that hit with the rep. When they miss forecast and you miss forecast, again, you're going up to someone. People are relying on you, senior leadership relying on you. So it's so hard. So what I would say is be prepared to be almost like a sounding board to your team. Everyone's going to come to you and you've got to be compassionate. People are going to make mistakes. I used to remember sitting in on sales calls and then people, you would help them. Like, this is how you qualify. These are things we need to be looking for. You do a call and they just wouldn't do any of that. It'd be incredibly frustrating. And then, when you're putting people on performance plans, it's putting people on performance plans, letting people go out for business. Just put yourself in that situation of having that conversation with someone. These are good people who are working hard, who are not necessarily being successful. And you take that personally. Like, have I done everything I can to develop them? When you're managing a team of 10, 15 people, it's hard, right? I can't spend 4 hours a day with the lowest performing rep every day because that's going to impact the other parts of my business. So letting people go is, to this day, and it will always be the worst part of any sales leadership role. And you take that personally. It's a failure you have to live with. And it could be your fault. It could be the rep. So it could be anyone's fault. It could be external factors. They may have just got really unlucky on 5 deals in a row or something. So that added pressure of managing people, the one-on-ones that you have with people. I was doing 8 to 10 one-on-ones a week on a Monday and Tuesday. That's all you're doing. As salespeople, the thing we love the most is speaking to customers. We love being out on the road. We love traveling. You grab a lunch before the meeting. You go for a beer with the customer. Those things typically go away. You're not doing as much traveling. You're in the office a lot more. You're spending a lot more time in Excel sheets, looking at deal sizes, deal values, qualification, your mentoring, training. So it's a very different role to what you're used to. So take a long, hard look. But I would say, there's nothing wrong with, if you've got the opportunity, taking it. And, if it's 18 months in, 2 years in, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you know what? I enjoy selling a lot more. You can go and make a ton of money and be incredibly successful being an individual contributor all the way up to retirement. So there's no pressure to say, I need to go into leadership. People are hiring, people all ages. So it's no one's looking to say, oh, they're too old, they're too young. It's can they do the role? How good are they? And what passion do they have for the role? So it's not, don't take it as a given. It's something you need to do. Some of the best salespeople I know are still selling in their 60s and they're loving it. And the happiest people you'll ever meet, because they knew that leadership wasn't for them. So they're in their nice big houses. They've got this great lifestyle. They're friends with all their customers.
Yeah.
And it's a probably slightly less stressful life, I would say.
It's fascinating, right? It takes me back. Was listening to a feature by John McMahon. Not sure if you know John. I suspect you do. Board member at Snowflake, Lacework, and more. And he said, when being asked a similar question, was, would you want to raise more children, in essence, right? And the reason that he said that was because, when you're looking at other reps and potentially pitching to them the thought of taking on leadership, you've got to constantly pay attention to them, nurture them, develop them, coach them, give them all the attention in the world. It isn't always as glamorous as it can once seem, but absolutely, if someone's got aspirations to be a CRO, be in the C-suite, be a VP of sales, it is going to be the natural next step for them to take. But to your point, you can make a lot of money as a top performing AE. So it's really about thinking what's important to you and what does your own version of success look like in life, right? So fascinating. I want to fast forward again to really your journey now. So you mentioned at the very beginning in your intro, you're now a founder, right? You're now raising capital. You're now running an entire business, right? And potentially going to be hiring more leaders and more team members. To tell us now about the transition from fully fledged salesperson and sales leader to actual fully fledged business leader, you could say.
Yeah. And it kind of comes out to our just previous question, right? How do you know if you're ready? How do you know if you're ready for the next step? You know if you're ready because you're kind of bored of the job you're doing right now. Bored's probably a bad word, but like, let's just say, let's start from the beginning. If you're a BDR and you're out of your depth, day one, like I said, I just didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was insecure. I had anxiety about making cold calls. And then fast forward 12, 18 months, I could do the job in my sleep. I was like showboating, making cold calls because I wanted people to hear me. And I was just, 10, 15 meetings a month. I just found the whole thing easy.
Yeah.
So I was ready for the next role. Then I went into becoming an AE, senior AE, and I just got it down. I just found qualifying deals. I kind of you get a bit lazy because you just know, the movie inside out. You've seen it a million times before. Same with sales leadership. I think CloudBees, we ran Northern EMEA. We grew it to the most successful region in the country. We closed a couple of $9 million deals within the team. And it was great. And I got that buzz from closing those large deals was amazing, right? Helping the team and get to that level. Building teams from scratch. But I kind of felt like, okay, I'm at a point in my career. Do I want to keep doing that? I kind of know that movie now. I know what to do. I want to do something different now. And I've always had aspirations I want to build my own company. But I don't want to just start a company for the sake of starting a company. There needs to be a real problem that exists today to solve. Otherwise, it's doomed for failure, in my opinion. Yeah. Everything I'd seen was, people can't personalize at scale. Personalization takes time. Sales tools have flooded the market. People are using sequences, cadences. They're sending the same one to every single person. Yeah. So I kind of saw, there's a huge opportunity here. So I was like, I'm going to put the two things together, right? My ability to build and scale teams. I was lucky enough to meet a brilliant co-founder, a technical co-founder who's had a similar career path to me, but in the engineering side of things. So had started as a individual engineer, going all the way up, managing large engineering teams. We kind of came together and thought, this is great. I've seen this from a data and technical side, and me personally, I'd seen it from business side. So we went out, and I've probably said I've never felt so excited in my life, right? Wow. Just to go out there and build something. I've never built, as with any other salesperson, we've probably never built product before, right? So we've never built product or been involved in engineering teams. So we went out, we built an MVP, minimal viable product. So it's a really basic version of the solution. We did this 18 months ago, and it was just me and him. And we went and we thought, we'll go raise some funding. Everyone's raising funding. It must be easy to raise funding because you see it all on LinkedIn. Everyone's announcing new rounds. It's a lie. It's incredibly hard. VCs are looking at you how big's the product going to be? How good's the team? How many customers do you have? they're talking about giving you like $500,000, $1 million. So we were lucky enough to partner with Seed Camp, who were like one of the best, I think, if not the best early stage investor in Europe, right? They UiPath, Hopin, Revolut, TransferWise. I think they've had like 5 or 6 unicorns recently. So we were lucky enough to partner with them and scale those organizations. So we raised like just close to $1 million in pre-seed. We built out our MVP. And then what we've done since then is we've gone to market, we've tested it out. We've now got, I think, somewhere close to like 30 or 40 paying customers. We're about to raise our next round and just scale the sales org, basically. And we've now got, from a year ago to today, it was just me and my co-founder. I think there's 16 of us. So we've gone through all that in a year, but it was incredibly hard. It's completely out of my depth, right? How do we build product? How do we know if the product's going to get you? So now we're at a point where we're building prototypes. We're testing prototypes out on customers before. We've got a head of product in. We've got a head of marketing in. We've got a content writer in. If you asked me 12 months ago, what do I know about SEO? No idea, but now we're working. I understand everything. Well, I understand a bit more about SEO.
Yeah.
The thought that goes into where you even place a button on a product, you never even think. As a user, you're like, yeah, this is great.
Sure.
But you start looking at how users engage with your application. And I just find all of this extremely exciting. And then I remember winning our first deal. It was an individual paying user. So I'd left my previous role where I was like heading up Northern EMEA. I think the last deal we closed was probably around $2 million. So it's great. And then fast forward, maybe I think halfway through the year, maybe say June of 2021, we closed our first individual user. It was $19 a month.
Wow.
I remember getting a bigger buzz off the $19 deal than we did off a $2 million deal, because it was something we'd built from scratch. And now we've got a lot more. We've got a lot more bigger customers than $19, yes. But it was everything that went into that first $19, right? It was finding a co-founder, building the base product, getting funding, hiring more engineers, testing the product, going through multiple iterations of a really bad product, getting feedback, improving to the point where someone's like, hey, I love this. This is changing the way I prospect. I've already got 4 meetings using OneShot this week. And like hearing that and hearing people getting success from that, you're like, and the buzz you get from that. And now I look into the future. I'm like, okay, great. Probably by the end of this year, we're going to have 40 or 50 employees.
Wow.
And then I look to the next 2-3 years. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. We could have like a 500 employee company. And we could be changing the way everyone sells today.
Yeah.
Everyone should be using one-shot messaging every time they prospect. So the idea of that is very different. So again, it's stepping up from SDR to AE to enterprise to becoming a co-founder. That path is there for anyone. Anyone can start their own thing now, which is great.
It's phenomenal that as a story and as a journey. Just, last couple of things from me here, but, one thing I'd love to understand with all of that said is really what drives you at this stage of your career, right? Because you have spoken a little bit about, you mentioned kind of being a little bit bored or things getting a bit stale. But I think for a lot of people, as they're getting older and their careers maturing, they almost want to start easing off the gas a little bit, right? But you've kind of gone from being there to just pouring a ton of gasoline on a fire. So what is it that drives you, and what is it that is really put you in a position that you've walked kind of back into the fire, so to speak, when many would be wanting to ease off?
Yeah. I think it's like insanity. It's probably I should have when you're like, I should have just cruised out for the next 10, 20 years. I think it's exactly that point, right? I think you have to fast forward to your retirement day, fast forward to 65, 70 or whenever you retire. And you need to be able to look back at your career and think, did I do everything I wanted to do? Did I try everything? Did I push myself to the limit? And if I kind of went down that career path, I think I would have had huge regrets. I'm not saying that we're going to build a unicorn, a decacorn, or anything like that. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just like, I want to be able to know, did I test myself to the limits? Would I have any regrets? And I look back and I was getting to a point in my career and I'm like, okay, I can go on, VP of EMEA, GM, CRO. I can see that career path, like easily. I can see that path in the next 3 to 5 years. Do I want to do that? Or do I want to do that for myself? I've built a skill set up for the last 18 years where I've built and scaled sales teams. I've worked with salespeople. I've been involved in like the largest deals at every company I've been worked at. So I'm like, that's pretty good insight that a lot of people don't have. A lot of people, co-founders, founders might have come from a technical background and don't have that commercial experience. I'm like, my commercial experience is up there. So I actually want to throw myself back in there. I want to feel uncomfortable. And like for the last, I think we've only got one SDR now, but before that I was the SDR. So I was picking up the phone, I was cold calling, I was doing all that. I was like, wow, this is like, I forgot how hard it is. Because I've been building, scaling teams, I've not really been prospecting for the last 10 years. So to go back in and start prospecting, very different. It's 10 times more competitive than it used to be. Automation, buyers are incredibly hard to get hold of. So, your value prop has to be there. So yeah, I thought, challenge myself, go for it. The rewards are there, obviously. If you build a successful company, it's not necessarily about the money. As in most people who've been in enterprise roles, it's enterprise sales is quite a lucrative position. You can earn good money. So I'm not building a company to become a gazillionaire. That'd be great. I wouldn't mind. I'm not saying I wouldn't. But it's more like, can I challenge myself? Can we build something great? And it sounds cheesy, but can you provide value to your customers? If I can look back and say, hey, imagine if we built some sales software that helps every single salesperson in the world. We've had some customers in the last few months come back and like, this is amazing. I was literally struggling with my role. I was behind on some of the meetings. I was really struggling to know what to do. And I've started using OneShot. I'm not pitching this. This is like true feedback. And it's really helped me book like these extra meetings, which has taken the pressure off me. Yeah. And just to hear that, it was like quite like amazing. I didn't necessarily start the company for that feedback, but to hear that, wow, actually helping people in their role and knowing what it's like to miss targets and have a bad month, have a bad quarter. If we can help people avoid that, that's like brilliant. As a salesperson, like deep ingrained into me, I know helping salespeople is great. Yeah. Prospects might be like, oh man, more salespeople. but as a salesperson, it's great.
The word that was standing out to me through all of that was just legacy, actually. You're going through a process of creating legacy, and it's become a little bit of a colloquial statement now when we say you get one shot at this life, no pun intended. You like that one. But we do really get one opportunity, right? And you want to be able to look back and say, all my cards are on the table. I gave it my all, right? Yeah. I pushed myself to the limit. As you said, I got as much out of this life as I could, and I drove all of the experiences that I dreamed of having in my life. And it sounds like you're doing exactly that. So kudos to you. My last question to you, I mean, I could have doubled the time with you. It really enjoyed this. But my last question to you is really what your biggest piece of advice is to someone that wants to go from where they are in their career right now to becoming elite.
Yeah. It's always hard to say one thing. I would say like a couple of things, I would say. And I'll start with the kind of mentor piece first, because I would say surround yourself with high performers or good people, right? High performers, good people, people who want to help you. One piece of career advice I got early in my career was a good salesperson is one who's willing to help other people. Especially at whatever stage you're at in your career. And even me, I've just started like as a co-founder. I'm speaking to as many good co-founders. We've got some really good angel investors who are part of the company. I speak with them. I listen to them on a regular basis. We've got the founder, the ex-founder of Gumtree. He's built a company from scratch with zero external funding to get acquired by eBay. That sort of advice you get from someone like that is brilliant. But looking back at the start of my career, I can name you every single person over 18 years who's helped me, who's given me deal advice, those great leaders, the great senior AEs. Look to people in your current organization who are brilliant, who are the top performing salespeople. They don't even necessarily even have to be in your same department, but look to someone who can help guide you throughout, that current role, not for the rest of your life, but just like, someone who can help you in that role. The second thing, just be accountable to yourself. We live in this kind of remote world now, and you just need to be honest with yourself. It's easy. Anyone today can leave their home office, go downstairs, put Netflix on, and watch that for 6 hours, and no one will know. No one will know. No one will care. But you are selling yourself short. So like, be accountable to yourself. Don't go crazy. Don't think I need to do 18-hour days, but just be accountable. Did I give it my best today? You're always going to have bad days, right? And you'll suck, and you might watch Netflix for 6 hours. That's fine as well. But just be accountable to yourself. Right? Am I pushing myself? Am I getting into my comfort zone? Because, you know, one day we all will retire. Hopefully, if we all get to a right old age where we get to that age, hopefully we're all fortunate enough. But, you know, you want to look back and think, okay, did I just sit about and just watch life go by, or did I like go on the attack and give it everything I've got, sort of thing?
I love it. Yeah. I love it. And what a way to go out. So look, really grateful for having you on. I think that was jam-packed full of insight. So thanks again for being our very first guest. That's got to be up there on your mantelpiece with one of your biggest accolades ever. So thanks again.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
We'll see you soon.
Cheers.